Arguably Alfred Hitchcock's finest film, Rear Window, opened in theaters 70 years ago today. And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of the Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday morning here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Now, many of you know that I am a bit of a savant when it comes to memory, that I have an unusual ability to recall names, dates, facts, figures, arcane little bits of trivia that the average person go right over their head. But the trivia that I'm about to share with you, I did not know. I don't want you thinking that I have all of this stuff memorized, just certain things. Today marks 70 years since the release of what some consider to be Alfred Hitchcock's finest achievement, Rear Window. And Rear Window is a sort of movie that could have been a stage play. It could have only been a stage play, because there's one main location that is where we spend the movie as the audience. Out of context, this film should not work. The idea behind it, it shouldn't work for a movie, but it does. And it's thanks to Hitchcock and his incredible cast, including Raymond Burr, who later became an enormous TV star as Lars Thorwald. This is a movie that is, in a way, about the experience of watching movies. And I'm not sure that Hitchcock was necessarily going through all those permutations and saying, I'm not only making a suspense thriller about a guy who is stuck in a wheelchair temporarily, who thinks that his neighbor across the courtyard bumped off his wife. I'm making a movie about the filmmaking process from the perspective of the audience. That we, even though we know deep down what we're seeing on celluloid, what we're seeing in a theater, on our phone, on a tablet, on TV, is not real. We have visceral reactions as if it is real. And we respond to the goings-on in the motion picture as if we can effect some kind of change on the outcomes, on the current situation. We've all done that. I'm going to assume we've all done that. We've all shouted instructions to characters. Well, imagine poor L.B. Jeffries, or Jeff, if you prefer. That is the principal character, played by James Stewart in this film, who represents an audience watching a suspense thriller and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And then when he thinks he has figured out what's going on, how can we prove what we think is what actually happened? L.B. Jeffries is an action photographer. He is apparently quite successful and a renowned photographer who, as the story opens, is in a wheelchair with a broken leg that he incurred while on the job at, I don't think it's the Indy 500, but something like the Indy 500, where he captured this unbelievable image. And presumably about a half a second after he captured the image, he got kind of bulldozed and fucked up his leg. And I think he was lucky that it was only his leg. Because the picture that he got and the implication that he ended up breaking his leg, could have been killed. So it is New York City. It is a brutally hot summer at a time where even somebody as presumably reasonably well off, they didn't have that much air conditioning in normal apartment buildings, super fancy apartment buildings perhaps. But I know for damn sure that my dear old dad, growing up a borough over in the Bronx, they didn't have any air conditioning in the apartment. When it was a 90-degree day, you just sat there and sweated your you-know-what off, and you suffered. So there is no social media, there's no internet. TV reception was SHIT. Hey, reading is fun, demental, but maybe you want to do something other than read. Maybe you are so frustrated that you got another week in this wheelchair, you're going a little stir crazy. So L.B. Jeffries starts watching his neighbors, and it's really not okay the way that he goes about it. He is spying on them, whether he would admit that or not. And then you get into the whole opening up a can of worms where, well, if you end up seeing something that if you hadn't, a certain individual may have gotten away with murder, or maybe not, are you then justified? Or should you have just not done it in the first place? And I know the movie from a number of years ago with Shia LaBeouf, Disturbia, took major components from Rear Window, and also in the late 1990s, the late great Christopher Reeve, who by this point was unfortunately confined to a wheelchair, there was a made-for-TV remake of Rear Window. It's the only actor that would have been okay in that role, given the circumstances. And even though it's not nearly Hitchcock, it was great to see Christopher Reeve back on screen. Even if the movie is more like a 2.5 to 3 stars out of 4 instead of a masterpiece. It's a worthy remake just because it enabled him to work, to star in a movie for the final time. He has special privileges as the forever Superman and a great human being on top of that. I'm glad they made that movie. But Rear Window, the Alfred Hitchcock film, throws so many questions at you, but you can just watch this movie for the entertainment, for the lighthearted moments, for all of the kind of wisecracks, and all of the commentary on society as it was in the mid-1950s. What would it be like today? Because if you think about it, yeah, we have social media, but the arguments of should we really be looking? Should we really be displaying so much of ourselves, Miss Torso? Hey, newlyweds, good. Pull the curtain down. We don't need to watch you have sex. Some people are just trying to sweat to death in peace. L.B. Jeffries is a naturally curious individual. It's part of why he is such a great photographer. He sees the world a little bit differently. And this is not the typical Hitchcockian narrative, and he did it so many times, of the wrong man or the main character being falsely accused, i.e. the Henry Fonda Hitchcock movie, The Wrong Man, or The 39 Steps, or Suspicion, or most famously, North by Northwest, among many others in which there is a concept of somebody who has not committed a crime or is not who everyone thinks he is. Hey, I've been wrongfully accused. Hey, my name is Roger O. Thornhill. Stop calling me George Kaplan, you fucking fucks. Cary Grant, basically. But then he reaches a point where he says, okay, all right, can't beat him, join him. George Kaplan here. You know, it's like Jurassic Park. Don't use my name. What, Dodson? Don't use my name. Dodson, we got Dodson here. Dodson. Nobody cares. But in the world of Rear Window, the obviously intelligent L.B. Jeffries is the only one sounding the alarm. There is some spooky, crazy shit going on across the courtyard. A traveling salesman, his wife, I mean, she's not that old, but it seems that she's an invalid. They quarrel a lot. They have a couple of moments where they're not quarreling, but she's suddenly not there. Jeff, you have a very active imagination. you need to lay off. And I think he killed her. And then we go from there. And what I mentioned about the incredible component that he is us watching a movie. The only problem is it's for real. You know, welcome to Fright Night for real. And to be more specific, follow this. So let's say, hypothetically, we're in a movie or we're in a movie theater and we're watching, just for reference, Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs. I don't love the movie, but there's a setup towards the end of the film where she is in an area of a house that she probably shouldn't be in because her life is at risk, and the bad guy is there. We want to warn her. We might actually say, "Get the fuck out of there!" Even though we know it's a movie, that's our reaction. Well, there is a moment in Rear Window, no spoilers, where L.B. Jeffries is watching somebody he cares about snooping in an apartment across the courtyard. He can't do anything, literally nothing, to affect a change in outcome. He might as well be watching a movie in a movie theater. He sees something and he realizes that the person he knows is about to be in huge danger. Like Clarice, spoiler alert, Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill is lurking. The difference is, deep down we know we're watching a movie. And yes, Rear Window is a movie, but the character of L.B. Jeffries, when he realizes the person he cares about, their life is going to be in danger in about 10, 9, 8. He freaks out and panics. And he is completely powerless to do anything, literally anything. That's going to play out the way it's going to play out, as if a movie. When somebody surprises another person and whammo. You just hope the person you care about doesn't end up dead. You can't do a goddamn thing about it. Movies have this effect on us, as if we are part of the story. The best of movies make us feel as if we are living the events with the characters. It's great cinema. And in the world of this film, we identify with Jeff, and he feels as helpless as us, would be a better way to put it, right? He can't do anything other than watch and pray that nothing bad ends up happening. But then, also no spoilers. At a certain point in the movie, Jeff actually has some skin in the game. This is where it diverges from watching a movie, because as much as this is like kind of crazy and there is a dinner theater and interactive and all of this kind of stuff, but if we solve a mystery, if we figure out exactly what happened in a movie, we know who the killer is. There was a murder. We know who the killer is. Killer's not going to come into the movie theater to try to get us. He's not going to show up at the door and say, "Hey, let me in, you son of a bitch." No. But in this movie, James Stewart goes from passive viewer, passive movie watcher of his neighbors across the courtyard to all of a sudden he is an active participant in what until now had been a theoretical, here's what probably happened. Maybe it happened. Jeff, you're barking up the wrong tree. Mrs. Thorwald's fine. And then all of a sudden, everybody who thought that L.B. Jeffries, a little bit of cabin fever, a little bit of all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy in The Shining, where Jack Torrance, a.k.a. Jack Nicholson, it's hard to separate the two, starts to go cuckoo. Of course, in the world of that movie, I would argue that he seems completely insane at the very beginning of the film. But this movie, it's not a horror movie, but it has elements of the horror movie, and it's completely inverted. Here's to think about this. The complex discovery plot, the classic horror story, has 4 phases, as I talked about, but for a refresher. Onset, dastardly doings are taking place. Discovery, we discover something bad has happened. Then the third stage is confirmation. That is when a main character or multiple characters know that something sinister, usually otherworldly, if it's a true horror film, it's something other. It could be the shark in Jaws. But there are characters that believe it, and usually there's one dissenting character that says, bullshit. This is a naturally occurring scenario. It could be deaths, but this is a naturally occurring scenario. And confrontation, we got to confront it. Well, in the world of Rear Window, James Stewart's L.B. Jeffries, he discovers what he thinks is a murder. He's the only person in the story, with the exception of the killer. We don't really know about that guy or girl. But he is the only one who thinks that, no, there's an onset, and then I'm pretty sure I discovered a murder because there's no body. What happened to the wife? Jeff, shut up or you're going to get yourself in trouble. The confirmation are the other characters. The Thelma Ritter character realizing he's right. The character of the detective who is his friend and keeps thinking, you got to cut this out, knock this off. Okay, Doyle was the name of the character. He realizes, son of a bitch, almost too late. And Grace Kelly, who was actually the first person to come over to the side of, I think this guy murdered his wife. It's the inverse. It's not what we expect. But it works brilliantly. And Hitchcock is able to have moments of humor throughout the film, even as the tension kind of ratchets up. We still have those moments where we take a pause, a look by a character, a funny line. For a suspense thriller that has moments of almost unbearable tension, especially in the final half hour, it is funnier than you expect. And it's a tribute to Hitchcock, getting the most out of his actors and actresses. I mean, Thelma Ritter was like practically a lifetime final boss. She's incredible in everything she was ever in, but especially in this film. She plays L.B. Jeffries' nurse. Presumably works with the insurance company that he was injured, as you say. Could, if he were a National Geographic photographer, which he isn't, but if he were, like, he's covered. So she comes to tend to him, help him take a bath, whatever it might be. She's phenomenal. James Stewart is great. I don't know that he's supposed to be as old as he actually looks, because James Stewart, I believe, is still in his 40s. No offense, Jimmy, he looks like a grandpa in this movie. It doesn't help that Grace Kelly looks like she's grad school age, and in real life, I think she kind of was grad school age in 1954. But Grace Kelly coming on the scene in the movie, if you don't know that she's actually a very versatile and resourceful actress, this could be a thankless role. They always talk about, there are certain, rarely a guy. Steel Magnolias, Tom Skerritt. There's an example of a husband who is a thankless role instead of the usual where it's the wife, girlfriend, fiance. Well, in this movie, Grace Kelly as Lisa Fremont, high society lady. Oddly enough, she made the movie High Society in the same year, but she is a upper echelon young lady. I think Grace was playing older. I think her character is probably supposed to be 5-6 years older than she actually was. But she is somebody who makes a lot of money. She's deep in the fashion industry. She's doing shoots all over the place. She's putting them together. And her whole life appears to be nothing but one meeting after another, one setup for a shoot, one setup for a gallery, a magazine spread after another. All she wants is for L.B. Jeffries to quit his job, do something that would allow them to spend as much time together as possible, and that's it. So she wants him to quit his job. Not the usual, the guy wants the woman, save the woman from a life of degradation. Oh, I met her, she was a stripper. Bro, what was she making? $3,000-4,000 a night. Oh, but you wanted to save her from all that money. What a great guy you are. Well, this is the opposite. This is not a thankless role for Grace Kelly, because she believes that her and L.B. Jeffries are a perfect match. He thinks they're not, and is a kind of ridiculous absurdity that James Stewart, grandfatherly James Stewart, who clearly has a lot of affection for her, even at the beginning of the movie, he keeps trying to break it off with her. She's too perfect. She's got too much money. She's too classy. She's too this. Get the fuck out of here, bro. That's the only thing in this movie. I mean, maybe it was supposed to be funny. It's screamingly funny. But his hesitancy to go further with her is how and why the character of Lisa Fremont says, fuck this. We're more alike than you know. I'm not just a pretty face having martini lunches and making a ton of money and wearing a $10,000 dress in 1954. I can do this. And we are going to get to the bottom of this if I die trying. And so you get into the sort of situation where the guy was imagining what would his dream partner be. And it turns out that the dainty, mega classy Lisa Fremont, that was his dream partner right under his nose. And he almost didn't see it until it was too late. And throughout, you have the sense of a master filmmaker, as Roger Ebert would say, delighting in the way that he knows he's going to play the audience like a violin. Because there are Hitchcock movies where he builds suspense and surprise in equal measure. But then there are the films where he's more interested in suspense and going deep with characters, such as Vertigo. In North by Northwest, the surprise of who George Kaplan is, similar to Vertigo, where we kind of learn the mystery halfway through. In North by Northwest, the question of who's George Kaplan gets answered relatively early in the film, and that is a rare situation where it's a thriller where the audience is way ahead of the main character, Roger O. Thornhill. In this film, we are kind of tied with the characters. We are not way behind or way ahead of them. And that adds to the building of the suspense. And the way, as I said, the last half hour is almost unbearable in the best possible way. Similar to, from a horror movie perspective, I would say the last half hour of Rosemary's Baby, it's almost impossible. How much, especially if it's your first time, where you're clenching your fists and clenching your teeth, and you can't believe what's going on here. So Rear Window is a movie that was appreciated in its day. It was a hit for whatever that's worth. And it is generally regarded as one of the greatest movies ever made. Now, the Sight and Sound poll that gets run every 10 years, Vertigo, among the movie version of Seamheads, statisticians, Vertigo is generally regarded to be Hitchcock's best film. Now, I've debated this and other topics in this ballpark. Vertigo is a brilliant film, but it is not an enjoyable watch. It is a very difficult film to sit through, especially when you realize that James Stewart's character is not as heroic as he appears to be. And not that he's a quote-unquote villain, but he's a very disturbed individual. It's not something that you would have automatically assumed. Now, you could argue that L.B. Jeffries is a little bit off-kilter, but it's understandable because of the situation that he finds himself in. But Rear Window is a legitimate all-timer. And the fact that it's not 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, I find incredible. It should be 100%. It's at 98%, which means that 2 critics out of 100 said, it's not that good. I argue and would argue that this film, although it has dated elements, there's some effects work that's a little bit wonky because how could it not be? But the film is masterful. Every component of it, even Hitchcock's cameo, which comes at a moment you wouldn't expect. He plays a guy winding a clock in the apartment of, I think he's a composer, a musical composer. It's not really, I guess you could say it's a mystery thriller, but it doesn't feel like a mystery thriller. It just feels like a straight up suspense film with comedic elements. But again, getting hung up on genre is not really that important. If you have not seen Rear Window, it is on the list of films that you absolutely must see. And one way that I would describe How do you figure out what you need to see? There's nothing wrong with following a great man or a great woman theory. And what I mean specifically is you take, let's say, 10 filmmakers and you watch 3 movies each, if you never have. So you have Steven Spielberg. What are your 3? Well, I don't know. You could watch E.T., you could watch Raiders of the Lost Ark, you could watch War of the Worlds. It doesn't matter. Pick 3 that you get the sense, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Empire of the Sun, Schindler's List. Pick 3. Martin Scorsese, Goodfellas, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver. Something along those lines. With Alfred Hitchcock, Rear Window, Psycho, North by Northwest. Those are the 3 that I would say must be seen if you consider yourself someone who loves movies and is interested. Vertigo it's just a little too heavy. It might put you off watching any more Hitchcock. Wow, this guy's really fucked up. No shit. No, I mean Hitchcock. No shit. Right? The dark side of genius. But Rear Window is so much more than just a story of a bored photographer who thinks a neighbor might have bumped off his wife. There are components in the film that might not be apparent upon first viewing. And it is a movie that the more you watch it, it almost just keeps getting better because there are things that you miss that you pick up on the second and third time through. The suspense still builds. You still want to call out to L.B. Jeffries, wake up! He's in the apartment. And the best of cinema, there is that interactive feel. And remember in the movie The Truman Show, where the people watching Truman Burbank on the show, watching him, they're screaming for him to take certain actions. It's the same concept. Everyone does it. We might not even be aware of it sometimes. We start to go like this. Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, released 70 years ago today, September 1st, 1954. And this is a little bit personal trivia. My first film class, literally the first full class I took at New York University after orientation, was called The Language of Film. Just what it sounds like. All of the movie terms, swish pan, tracking shot, all of that kind of stuff. Almost every movie term, every glossary item is used in the movie Rear Window. But the first film we screened in that class, it could have been September 1st, 1994, was Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. And the reason why we screened it, Professor Richard Allen said, it is just about the best teaching film ever made. Because so much of what I'm going to point you in the direction of, it's all here in this movie. Thanks to Alfred Hitchcock, James Stewart, Grace Kelly, Thelma Ritter, and the rest, Raymond Burr, the rest of the supporting cast. There's not that many, but the people across the courtyard, some of whom have no lines of dialogue, everybody brings it for just an amazing cinematic experience. This has been episode 289 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday morning with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or any of the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then.